Every 4 years, an entire country bets against him, and every 4 years he makes them regret it. But for the longest time, it was the other way around. For the longest time, the country bet against him, and it was right. Here is the cruel little secret of Lionel Messi's life. At his club, he was a god, untouchable. For Barcelona, he didn't lose finals, he won them. He didn't shrink in big games, he ended careers in them. Week after week, year after year, he was simply the greatest thing anyone had ever seen wearing those colors. And then every summer he flew home, pulled on a different shirt, the sky blue and white of Argentina, and somehow became a completely different man. The magic flickered, the trophies vanished. And his nation, the most football-obsessed country on earth, watched this happen and came to a verdict that would haunt him for over a decade. Brilliant for Barcelona, invisible for Argentina. To understand why that cut so deep, you have to understand what Argentina actually wanted from him, because it was never just goals. In Argentina, you don't simply play football. You answer for Maradona. You live in the shadow of a man who, in 1986, picked an entire nation up on his back and carried it to World Cup glory almost single-handedly. He didn't just win, he dragged them there, screaming, fighting, bleeding for the shirt. And ever since, every Argentine who ever laced up boots has been measured against that ghost. So when Messi arrived, small, quiet, humble, a genius who let his feet do the talking and never beat his chest, the country didn't see their new savior. They saw everything Maradona wasn't. They wanted a warrior who screamed, a man who would look his teammates in the eyes and demand they win. And a part of his own nation kept whispering the same thing. He doesn't have it in him. He doesn't bleed for us the way Diego did. And the worst part? Messi wanted it more than any of them. The man who had won everything there was to win still went to bed dreaming of one trophy, the one thing his country actually cared about, the one thing that kept slipping through his fingers in the cruelest ways imaginable. He didn't need the World Cup for his trophy cabinet. He needed it for his soul. And every 4 years, the universe found a new and more painful way to rip it away from him. Because his story with that shirt wasn't success. It was heartbreak, stacked on heartbreak, stacked on more heartbreak. It started before he even kicked a ball. 2006. 18 years old, the most exciting teenager on the planet, and his manager left him frozen on the bench while Argentina were knocked out, never once letting him on to try and save them. 2010. He finally plays, and Germany takes his team apart piece by piece while he watches, helpless, finishing the entire tournament without a single goal. The whispers grew louder. The doubt began to harden. And this was only the beginning, the real heartbreak. The kind that makes grown men cry on the pitch, the kind that made the greatest footballer alive quit his own country in despair. All of that was still to come. The road from a club hero and a national zero to lifting the World Cup as the greatest of all time was going to be the longest, most painful road in the history of the sport. And it begins with the cruelest night of his life, 2014, Brazil, the World Cup staged in the home of Argentina's most hated rival. And against that backdrop, something nobody expected began to happen. Messi, the man accused of disappearing for his country, started to carry a fairly ordinary Argentina side through the tournament almost by himself. A last-minute winner against Iran when the team had run out of ideas. Goals when they mattered most. He was dragging 11 men up a mountain on his back, doing exactly what his nation had always begged him to do. He won the Golden Ball as the best player of the tournament. He was 90 minutes, one match, away from silencing every mouth that had ever doubted him. One game from immortality. And then the universe did what it always did to Lionel Messi. The final was Germany. Of course it was Germany, the wall his Argentina kept crashing into year after year. The game crawled into extra time, locked at 0-0, the tension unbearable. And then, in the 113th minute, a young German named Mario Götze chested a ball down inside the box and volleyed it past Romero. 1-0, Germany, always Germany. Messi had given everything, and it still wasn't enough. And then came the image that would define his entire Argentina career. As he walked off, head down, the path to the dressing room took him directly past the World Cup trophy, gleaming gold on its pedestal, close enough to touch. He glanced at it for a fraction of a second, the one thing he wanted more than anything in the world, an arm's length away, and walked past it to collect an individual award that meant nothing to him, so close. And being named the best player at the tournament he had just lost made it so much worse. You'd think that would be the bottom. It wasn't. In 2015, Argentina lost the Copa America final to Chile on penalties. In 2016, they reached the exact same final against the exact same Chile, and this time Messi, the most reliable footballer alive, stepped up and missed his penalty, skeeted over the bar. Then he sat down on the pitch, alone in a sea of celebrating Chileans, put his face in his hands, and right there, at 29 years old, announced his retirement from international football. Stop and absorb the weight of that. The best player on the planet walked away from the shirt he had dreamed about as a boy, not because he wasn't good enough, but because the pain of losing finals had become physically unbearable. 4 finals, 4 defeats, a nation that loved him and resented him in the very same breath. The retirement didn't last. The guilt always pulls him back. But the wound stayed wide open, and 2018 was waiting to pour salt into it. Russia, an aging squad, no plan, just the same desperate prayer Argentina had relied on for a decade. Give Messi the ball and hope for a miracle. And then, in the round of 16, they ran into the future. A 19-year-old named Kylian Mbappe, who tore them to shreds and knocked them out 4-3. For most of the world, that was the eulogy. Messi was 31. 5 tournaments, 0 trophies. The window had slammed shut. The torch was being passed to Mbappe, and everyone agreed it was over. But what nobody could see yet was that the smoking crater Argentina had become was about to be handed to a man nobody respected. A 40-year-old former assistant who had never managed a senior team in his life. And he was about to change everything. His name was Lionel Scaloni, and when he got the job, the Argentine media laughed out loud. They called it a placeholder, a cheap stopgap. So naturally, he turned out to be exactly what every manager before him had failed to be. Scaloni did something almost laughably simple, and yet nobody in a decade had been brave enough to try it. He stopped asking Messi to do everything. For 10 years, Argentina had surrounded their genius with more and more attackers and prayed it added up. Scaloni surrounded him with soldiers instead, a hard-running, relentless, genuinely unpleasant team that would chase, press, tackle, and bleed for 90 minutes so that Messi didn't have to. An engine in midfield in Rodrigo de Paul, a young general in Enzo Fernandez, a defender in Christian Romero who treated every duel like it had insulted his family, and in goal, Emiliano Martinez, less a goalkeeper and more a psychological weapon wearing gloves. For the first time in his international career, Messi didn't have to drag a corpse up a hill. He just had to be Messi. But none of it would mean a thing unless they actually won something. And the first test came in the worst possible place imaginable. 2021, Copa America Final, Argentina versus Brazil. In Brazil, at the Maracanã, Argentina hadn't won a major trophy since 1993, 28 years of chokes and collapses. And to end it, they had to walk into the cathedral of their greatest enemy, in front of a hostile nation, and beat a Brazil side led by a peak Neymar. This wasn't a football match. This was an execution scheduled in front of the victim's family. Except this time, it was Brazil who ended up on the slab. 22nd minute, Angel Di Maria dinked the ball over the keeper with the calm of a man buttering toast. 1-0. And then Argentina did the one thing they had never been able to do. They held on. No collapse, no late heartbreak, no missed penalty waiting in the dark. Just 11 soldiers refusing to break. And when the whistle blew, Messi collapsed onto the pitch in tears. 28 years. The monkey wasn't just off his back. The whole zoo had been evicted. And here's the part that turned out to be the whole point. Messi wasn't even the best player in that final. Di Maria won it. For the first time, Messi didn't have to be a god. He was allowed to be a man on a great team, and that team had finally won him something. But everyone knew the truth. The Copa America was redemption. It wasn't the dream. It wasn't the gold trophy he'd been forbidden to touch in 2014. That one was still out there, 18 months away, and this time he would not be walking toward it alone. 2022, Qatar. Messi is 35, and for the first time he says it out loud. This is his last World Cup. The whole tournament gets framed as a farewell, a final audition for immortality. So of course, it opened with a disaster. Game 1, Argentina versus Saudi Arabia, a team they should have beaten in their sleep. Final score, Saudi Arabia 2, Argentina 1. One of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport. 36 matches unbeaten, erased in 90 minutes. The farewell tour had become a funeral before the body was even cold. And this is where you find out what Scaloni had built. No panic. Messi gathered the fans, told them to keep the faith, and then produced one of the greatest individual World Cup runs anyone has ever seen. He dragged Argentina past Mexico with a goal that seemed to change the temperature of the stadium. Against the Netherlands, he threaded
Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi reaches out for more history.
a no-look assist that defied human anatomy, buried his penalty, and stared down the entire Dutch bench in a celebration so petty it became legendary. Against Croatia, he turned a brilliant young defender named Joško Gvardiol into a traffic cone with a dribble that should be against the law. 5 goals. A nation dreaming. One match left, and the whole planet was watching for one reason. Could the greatest of all time finally finish the story, or would the universe pull the rug out one last cruel time? The final was France, and it was, by broad agreement, the greatest World Cup final ever played, which is a polite way of saying it nearly gave an entire continent a heart attack. Argentina came flying out of the gates.
A heartbeat. And Messi! Di Maria is the spare man.
A Messi
And
penalty.
Di
A
Maria!
flowing move finished by Di Maria. 2-0. For an hour, it looked less like a final and more like a coronation. And then Kylian Mbappe happened. The same Mbappe who had ended Messi in 2018 scored twice in the space of 97 seconds to drag France level. Extra time. Messi scored again, 3-2 surely now, and then Mbappe completed his hat-trick from the spot.
Mbappe. Into the galaxy of great!
3-3. The universe, it seemed, still had the sickest sense of humor in sport. Penalties. The exact mechanism that had broken Messi twice against Chile. The single cruelest way it could possibly end. For a few unbearable minutes, it looked like the most sadistic script ever written. Except this time, Argentina had Emiliano Martinez in goal. A man who treats a penalty shootout the way a cat treats a wounded bird. He saved one. The rest held their nerve. And then Gonzalo Montiel stepped up with 28 years of longing balanced on his right foot, and he scored. It was over. Lionel Messi had done it. 7 goals, 3 assists, the golden ball, the first man in history to win it twice, the boy from Rosario who was too small to play, too quiet to be a leader, who had been called a fraud and a choker, who had lost 4 finals and cried with his face in his hands and quit his country in despair. That boy was now a World Cup champion. The ghost of Maradona was finally laid to rest, and the man who beat him in 2018, Mbappe, scored a hat-trick in the final and went home with absolutely nothing. Careful what you wish for. This time, there was no walk past an untouchable trophy. His teammates lifted him onto their shoulders and carried him around the pitch like a king, and when he finally got his hands on that gold trophy, the one he'd been forbidden to touch 8 years earlier, he kissed it like it was the only thing in the world that had ever loved him back. The longest, most painful road in the history of the sport had finally, impossibly, reached its end. Or so everyone thought, because what came next would terrify every other country on earth. Winning didn't just complete Messi. It revealed that Argentina didn't actually need him anymore, not as an insult, but because Scaloni had built a machine so complete that the greatest player alive had become a luxury rather than a life support system. The old plan against Argentina, stop Messi, stop Argentina, was now obsolete. You stop Messi, and the rest of the team punishes you. There was no longer a correct answer. There was only the manner of your defeat. Which brings us all the way to a hamstring, a 38-year-old, and a stadium in Kansas City. 2026. The World Cup comes to North America, and Argentina arrive as defending champions chasing something only 2 nations in history have ever done: win the whole thing twice in a row. The last team to manage it was Brazil, more than 60 years ago. History said it could not be done. The noise was relentless. Messi was 38, nursing a hamstring injury for weeks, wrapped in cotton wool. Is he finished? Are these aging legs finally out of magic? They should have known better. They always should have known better. June 17th, 2026, Kansas City, Argentina versus Algeria. And the opponents famous left foot and smashed it past Algeria's goalkeeper, who happened to be Luka Zidane, son of Zinedine. Because of course the universe wrote it exactly that way. Then he scored again. Then he completed a hat trick. His first came the moment. Because there is a particular weight that history places on a number, and the number was 16. For years it had belonged to Klose, the quiet, machine-like German. To pass him, to stand alone at the very summit of the most watched competition football has ever known, Messi needed just one more goal. One goal to become, outright and forever, the greatest goal scorer in the history of the World Cup. And when it came, it was pure Messi. The ball broke to him, and there was no hesitation, no nerves, none of the doubt that had haunted his finals for a decade. Just that left foot, and the back of the net, and a record that had stood as a monument suddenly belonging to a 38-year-old from Rosario who was never supposed to grow tall enough to play this game at all. 17. Number 17. Read that again and let it land. The boy too small to be picked for playground matches, the man his nation called a fraud, a club hero, and a national zero, was now, at 38, in what should have been his farewell, standing alone at the top of the World Cup scoring charts, above Klose, above Ronaldo, above Pelé, above every striker who ever lived. This is why Lionel Messi is every country's worst nightmare. Not because he is unbeatable, but because every single time you convince yourself he's finished, every time you bet the house on Father Time finally collecting his debt, he looks up, finds the bottom corner, and makes you regret being born in a footballing nation. So, how do you measure greatness? By goals? He has more than anyone who ever lived. By trophies? More than any footballer in history. But the truth is, Messi's greatness was never really about the numbers. It was about the road. A boy handed an impossible set of cards, born poor, born sick, born too small, who lost and lost and lost again on the biggest stages, who cried with his face in his hands, who quit, who came back, and who got up off the floor one more time than the universe could knock him down. A nation once demanded he be Maradona. In the end, he gave them something Maradona never could, a story of a man who was broken in public again and again for over a decade, and who refused, absolutely refused, to stop chasing the only dream that mattered until it was finally, gloriously his. Don't take this for granted. We are watching greatness, and there will never, ever be another like him. This was the story of Lionel Messi.